He slept with his sisters. He murdered for sport. He turned the imperial palace into a brothel. And then he declared himself a living god. This is the true story of Rome's most depraved emperor, Caligula. Power. Absolute, unchecked power. What does it do to a mind? We are told stories of Rome's glory, its legions, its laws, its engineering. But today, we journey into its shadow. We speak of a time when the most powerful man on earth was not a statesman. He was a monster. When the ancient Roman historian Suetonius chronicled the life of Caligula, he didn't just write about a tyrant. He wrote about a creature of grotesque, unimaginable appetites. He wrote of an emperor who allegedly engaged in incest with all three of his sisters. He held a special, public obsession with his sister Drusilla. He paraded her before the Senate and the people, treating her not as a sibling, but as a wife. When she died, his grief was not human. It was psychotic. He deified her, making her a goddess, and promising death to anyone in the empire who did not mourn her sufficiently. But his depravity was not limited to his own family. He wrote of lavish banquets that were merely a prelude to depraved acts. Caligula would force the wives of high-ranking senators to attend. He would stroll past their dining couches, publicly critiquing their qualities as if they were livestock at a market. Then he would drag a woman of his choosing to a private room. He would return moments later to the party and shamelessly announce her performance to her humiliated husband, detailing her flaws or her merits. To Caligula, people were not human. They were things. They were toys for his amusement, and the entire Roman Empire was his personal, twisted playground. But the monster wasn't born overnight. This is the story of how a beloved prince became the most hated man in history. When the 24-year-old Gaius Caesar, known as Caligula, ascended to the throne in 37 AD, all of Rome celebrated. They loved him. He was the son of the beloved hero Germanicus, a man so popular the legions had once tried to make him emperor. Caligula had grown up in the army camps. The soldiers adored him. They gave him his famous nickname, Caligula, which means little boot, because his mother would dress him in a tiny soldier's uniform complete with miniature military boots. He was the empire's golden boy. His predecessor, the paranoid and gloomy Tiberius, had been hated. Caligula was a breath of fresh air. He began his reign with promise. He cut taxes. He freed citizens unjustly imprisoned by Tiberius. He burned the records of the treason trials. He hosted magnificent, spectacular games for the people, sparing no expense. For 7 glorious months, it seemed Rome had finally entered a new golden age. Then, something snapped. The ancient sources tell us Caligula fell gravely ill. A brain fever, Suetonius calls it, that nearly killed him. He was bedridden for weeks, the entire empire holding its breath. When he finally recovered, the hopeful young emperor was gone. In his place stood a tyrant. His paranoia became legendary. He saw conspiracies in every shadow, whispers in every hallway. His first act was to execute the man who had helped him gain the throne, the Praetorian prefect Macro. He forced his own father-in-law to commit suicide. He had his co-heir, the young Tiberius Gemellus, his own cousin, murdered on a trumped-up charge. He brought back the treason trials, not for justice, but as a personal piggy bank. He would execute wealthy senators just to steal their fortunes and fund his extravagant lifestyle. His favorite phrase became a terrifying motto, Oderant dum me tuant. Let them hate me, so long as they fear me. But his tyranny wasn't just political, it became divine. His ego, inflated by absolute power, shattered the bounds of human sanity. Caligula was no longer satisfied with being an emperor. He declared himself a living god. He began dressing as various deities. One day he would appear as Hercules, complete with a lion-skinned cloak and a club. The next, he was Neptune, the god of the sea. He would even appear as Jupiter, the king of the gods, demanding that senators and commoners alike kiss his feet and worship him. He built bridges connecting his palace to the temple of Jupiter so he could consult with the god, his brother. He ordered a statue of himself to be placed in the sacred temple in Jerusalem, an act of supreme blasphemy that nearly sparked a massive rebellion in the East. His megalomania was total, but his most famous act of contempt for the Roman elite was his horse. His beloved horse, Incitatus. Caligula didn't just love his horse, he worshipped him. He gave Incitatus a stable made of marble, a manger of ivory, and a jewel-encrusted collar. He had a dedicated team of servants who fed the horse oats mixed with flakes of real gold. He would host dinner parties in the horse's name, forcing senators to attend. But this was not just the love of an owner for a pet. It was an act of pure, calculated contempt. Historians claim Caligula announced his plan to make his horse, Incitatus, a consul, the highest-ranking official in Rome. It was the ultimate humiliation, a sign to the terrified Senate that in his eyes, his horse was more worthy of power than any of them. As his madness grew, so did his spending. He built 2 massive floating pleasure barges on Lake Nemi, palaces complete with marble floors, heating systems, and gardens. He ordered the construction of a pointless 2-mile-long floating bridge across the Bay of Baia, just so he could ride his horse across it wearing the armor of Alexander the Great. He did it, Suetonius says, simply to prove a prophecy wrong. He even staged a fake invasion of Britain. He marched his legions to the northern coast of Gaul, ordered them into battle formation facing the sea, and then commanded them to attack the ocean. He declared victory over the sea god Neptune and ordered his soldiers to collect seashells as the spoils of war, which he then paraded in a triumph back in Rome. These insane projects bankrupted the Roman treasury, and to get more money, Caligula's depravity reached its lowest point. He became Rome's pimp. Suetonius claims he converted the imperial palace itself into a high-class brothel. He forced the wives and daughters of the Roman elite to work there. He would send out criers to invite men of all ages to the palace and even offered them money to participate. He would auction off gladiators and even his own property, forcing senators to bid against each other at absurd prices and ruining any man who dared to not bid. He had become a monster who fed on humiliation, cruelty, and the suffering of his people. But you cannot rule an empire by fear alone. The monster who humiliated everyone eventually turned everyone against him. The Senate hated him. The people, once adoring, now starved and feared him. And finally, his own personal bodyguards, the Praetorian Guard, had enough. The conspiracy was led by a guardsman named Cassius. Cassius was a brave soldier, but he had a high-pitched, reedy voice. Caligula found this hilarious. He would mock Cheria relentlessly, calling him girly and forcing him to use obscene, demeaning passwords just to get his attention. This daily humiliation was the final spark. On January 24, 41 AD, during a series of games, Cassius Cherea and his fellow guards saw their chance. They cornered Caligula in a secluded palace hallway, away from his loyal German bodyguards. There was no trial, no mercy. Cherea reportedly struck the first blow. The others descended. They stabbed him again and again and again, over 30 times. The living god died like a dog in a pool of his own blood, shouting for help that never came. His wife, Melonia Caesonia, was murdered shortly after. His infant daughter, Drusilla, named after his favorite sister, was grabbed by a soldier and her head was smashed against a wall. His entire line was extinguished. Caligula ruled for just 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days. But his reign of terror left a permanent scar on the idea of absolute power. So, what was he? A calculating, sadistic sociopath? A victim of a debilitating illness that shattered his mind? Or was he simply the first emperor to realize that when you are the most powerful man in the world, there is no one left to tell you no? The story of Caligula serves as a terrifying warning, a glimpse into the darkness that lurks when one man is given the power of a god. What do you think was the true reason for Caligula's madness? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Roman Legacy for more stories.
If you love history, legends, and great mysteries, hit that subscribe button and join our journey into the past.